ethical decisions and when you have to make these tough calls, not only do you lose friends, but you can gain enemies. And sometimes that's just okay.
This is Let Your Life Speak, an audio program highlighting the exceptional work of Sidwell Friends School alumni. I'm Bryan Garman, head of school for Sidwell Friends, a pre-K through 12th grade independent Quaker school located in Washington, D.C. In this interview, I sat down with Kim Ford, the president and CEO of Martha's Table. So tell me about how you came to Sidwell Friends and when you came to Sidwell Friends.
So, of course, I'm a native Washingtonian, and I went to Shepherd Elementary School. And my mother said that, the next public school, if you will, was not necessarily going to be the option that she wanted to pursue. And so I toured Sidwell, applied to Sidwell. I was lucky enough to get in, so I came in 7th grade.
Okay.
I was on Team South, and I remember that well. I remember in 7th and 8th grade, all my friends, well, the majority of my friends went to Jefferson, and some went to Deal, and I didn't necessarily want to be at Sidwell. I wanted to be with my friends, so I spent a couple of years, or at least the middle school years, being the class clown, if you will. Apparently, there's a time between 8th and 9th grade where the middle school and upper school teachers would get together and go through all the students. And they, I guess with me, they told me they spent a lot of time on me and my antics. And I was told, you should probably harness your power for good. And by that time, or at least certainly by 10th grade, I knew that I was going to be here and really settled in. And just, I guess change the way that, you go from being the class clown to understanding that you can engage people in a more productive way, if you will.
Yeah. Well, when I met you in my first year as a teacher here, you were the convener of the collections, and you were president of the student body, and there was nothing about you that suggested class clown. Right? You were funny and engaging, but you also had this amazing presence in front of your peers. Tell me about that moment and what that meant to you to be in that position at Sidwell.
Well, I really enjoyed being the student body president, co-presidents with Jesse Tompkins, and we really enjoyed listening to our colleagues, engaging with them, and really setting the tone for the assemblies. And when there were tough topics, because over the years, there were tough topics to talk through, to be compassionate and empathetic. When there were lighthearted moments, to embrace those. I have so many memories of different moments, not just being up on the stage, but in the hallways. Yeah. One of the things that people have always said, and it's really interesting, they say it at Martha's Table now, is I learned everyone's name, and I would walk through the halls and speak to everyone by name. And people say, how do you do that? Like, what's your trick? And I don't have a trick. I just naturally learn people's names. And at Martha's Table, I learned everyone's name in one day. And people were very impressed by that. But that has just always been something natural that comes to me.
Yeah. What were some of the tough topics that you had to address as convener?
There was an incident where there was a big party, and number of people got in trouble, if you will. It was quite well known. It was a very large party, and again, a number of people got in trouble, and we as a school had to have a meeting for worship about conduct and behavior and substances and other things of the like, and to really reflect on how you can have appropriate fun and how other types of fun might cause harm to yourself and to others. And so that's one that I really remember.
Yeah, and that's a tough position to be in as a peer leader in something like that, because there's a lot of pressure from your peers around what you should think on that. How did you navigate that?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, both of the co-presidents were at said party.
Yeah,
So we had to be honest with the fact that, we were there as well. And again, just to own up, and in a position of leadership, you also have to step up and say, and own that and say, you know what, yep, we were there. Yes, these things happened. That is true. And to, again, go through that with your peers, but again, as somebody who's also there with you taking the responsibility.
Yeah. So as a leader or as a human, you're always going to make mistakes. And so you have to find a way to respond to those.
Right.
Yeah. And you did that. And
here's hoping.
Yeah. And so you leave Sidwell, and where do you head from there?
So I went to Vanderbilt undergrad. When I was a kid, I was very focused on what I wanted to do. I said I was going to go into the automotive industry and then into government and politics. It's exactly what I did. I designed my major in international business and Japanese at Vanderbilt. I used to design cars for Nissan North America. After doing that, I said, okay, well, now it's time for me to go into government and politics. So I went to the University of Pennsylvania and got a master's in public administration and was lucky enough to end up in President Obama's administration.
So you were an appointee in the Department of Education, is that right?
Well, when I was appointee, I was actually at the White House. I worked for Vice President Biden, implementing the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. That's the stimulus bill.
Right.
$787 billion package. It's 2 years of my life I don't quite remember. It was very, very big, very fast economic stimulus package. And it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I appreciated the time there. But it was the first time that I lived in D.C. in about 10 years. I mean, of course, I would come back for holidays and such, and you see flashes of change. But coming back and living in D.C., I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? Like, what happened to the city? And so I ran around the White House and I said, I'm from D.C., put me on a D.C. project. And so the Department of Homeland Security was consolidating their headquarters in an economically disadvantaged part of D.C., St. Elizabeth. And so they asked me to lead the neighborhood revitalization efforts for that project. And it was a really amazing experience. On the one hand, with the Recovery Act, the agencies would do anything that you asked them to do, right? I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. With the neighborhood revitalization, it was like, well, if you can make something work, great, and if not, oh well. And that became really frustrating for me. And so in response to a family member who asked me, who leaves the White House and goes to the junior college, I said, somebody who's trying to do something for the residents of the District of Columbia. And so actually, when my appointment was up, I was lucky enough, and I'm very honored to have been offered the opportunity to stay. I actually went to the community college, which was new at the time. I knew nothing about community colleges. I was the director of college readiness and community outreach. And I loved it. And within a year became Dean of Workforce Development and Lifelong Learning. Mm-hmm. And it was exactly what I wanted, the ability to be at a lever for change for the residents of the District of Columbia.
You said that the city had changed in so many ways after your 10-year absence. What did you really notice that was different about your city?
I mean, there were areas, like when I grew up, there were areas you absolutely did not go to that now people lived in and were out walking dogs at like 10 p.m. If you grew up when I grew up, Logan Circle was like not somewhere that you lived or dined or walked around. Actually, it's so interesting with Martha's Table. When I used to volunteer with Martha's Table 25 years ago, 14th Street was very bad.
And that's where Martha's Table was.
Yes, Martha's Table was 14th and W. I mean, you 2 blocks up, you're at 14th and Clifton, Euclid. I mean, again, 25 years ago, that was not the area that you go to.
Right.
And so now look at 14th Street. 14th Street has completely changed, and I can tell you that the people who lived there then are nowhere to be found anywhere near 14th Street now. And so, that's how the city had changed. When you think of U Street, 14th Street, that was not the way it was back in the 90s.
So you're talking about a process of gentrification in many ways, right?
Right.
You mentioned then, of course, you are in this position now of president and CEO of Martha's Table, one of the most influential and important organizations that the district has ever known. And you smile, but it's true.
We appreciate that classification. we wouldn't say that about ourselves, but thank you.
Well, it has had a tremendous impact on this city. Obviously had a long-standing connection between Sidwell Friends and Martha's Table, which I'd like to talk about. But the organization moves, right?
Yes.
It has got a wonderful new facility.
Yes.
And is focused on wards 7 and 8, right?
Yes.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about that and how you ended up there? I mean, there's a big chapter here in between where you run for the congressional delegate.
Oh yeah.
Right. So there's that.
There's that.
Right. So you're the dean of workforce education. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so dean of workforce development and lifelong learning.
Yeah.
Then the U.S. Department of Education. Where I
Right.
was
So that's where the
non-political.
okay.
Exactly.
So you're there, and so you move into that. And let's finish that piece. Tell us a little bit about that, and we can get the whole trajectory here.
Well, when I was at the community college, we were successful. I mean, I'm happy to say that. We really were successful. What we really saw happen was that you could take people at any point in life and offer educational on-ramps and a career path to success so that people could achieve their dream. You know, that's the 50-year-old, that's the 18-year-old, and everything in between. It was really interesting to see if that was something that was possible nationally. And because of the work that we did, we caught the attention of the Department of Ed. So the areas that I had at the community college, career and tech ed, adult ed, correctional reentry ed, and all community colleges nationally, that was my portfolio at the U.S. Department of Ed. And what I quickly found out is actually you can't do what we did on the ground at the federal level for a number of reasons, but really basically the way that the funding is structured, the way of the political structure, we weren't able to do kind of what we did on the ground at a national level. And so then I quit and ran for Congress because that's what everybody does, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But in all seriousness, why I was having that moment again, I mean, my career has gone from national to local, and what I've been looking for are levers for systemic change. And my heart just started coming back to D.C. and my office at the Department of Ed overlooked the wharf, and watching the entire wharf get wiped out and watching them build these new structures, and I watched it every day, and it just pulled me. I was like, we have to do more. We have to be able to get DC residents involved. I mean, I could see the people who were working, on the buildings. I could see the cars and the license plates, and I'm like, man, here we go again. Like, what's going to happen to the people in that community? Are they going to benefit? No. And so that's why I ran. And I ran on an education and workforce platform because I believe that sits at the heart of everything. And then I was lucky enough after that to be selected president and CEO of Martha's Table, and I'm so humbled by that.
And what drew you to that position?
Again, it's the same thing I've been talking about, a lever for systemic change. Yeah. And with Martha's Table moving into a place-based initiative, and I've done some place-based work locally and nationally, that is amazingly interesting. So you talk about moving from 14th Street. A lot of people think, okay, well, they moved because the needs shifted, and that's true in part. But a part of going into a place-based initiative is that we actually know that what happened on 14th Street in terms of the economics and the development and the business and all of that, that's going to come to where we are. The difference is whether or not the people who are there now can stay and thrive. And that's the work that we're in. Because again, we can't pretend like this stuff isn't going to happen, but it can happen with the people, with the community. So again, they can stay and thrive. And so that's what all of our work is revolving around now, at least our new work. And we still have a presence in Northwest at 15th and Columbia Road. We still have our free food truck that goes out every
McKenna's
day.
Wagon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we thank you for all those sandwiches
that
the young people make.
Yeah.
We go through 10,000 sandwiches a week.
Yeah.
10,000 sandwiches a week. And honestly, if only 8,000 come in, we have to limit the number of sandwiches that we can give out to people. And that's not what we want to do. So again, we really do thank you. It's really important. We also have our Outfitters Boutique where people can shop for children's clothes and adult workforce attire at no cost. That's on MLK. And our brand new headquarters are 2375 Elvins Road, Southeast. It's beautiful.
Amazing facility.
It is. It's the most beautiful building you will ever see. And we always welcome anyone to come visit us.
Yeah, and tell us about what's happening in the building right now and how that building is becoming a hub for change and support for the community.
Well, absolutely. So, over these past, this is our 40th year. We're very excited. Strong 40. So in the building in Northwest and in our Southeast headquarters, there are educational campuses where we have nationally accredited early childhood education centers where we support young people 6 weeks to age 4.
Yeah, it's a beautiful school facility.
It is. So we have a school within a nonprofit. That's what
Right.
we always tell folks. We also have lobby markets at both of those locations where people can come in and shop at no cost for fresh fruits and fresh vegetables. We see about 100 people a day at both locations. And then, as you mentioned, the hub. So the building is 57,000 square feet. It's all glass. It's beautiful space, and it's what the community asked for. We sent advance teams out before we even came and said, what do you want? And people said, we want open space, we want glass, we want something that just treats you with dignity and respect. And so I see people out in the community and they'll say, I helped you build that building. And I'm like, oh yeah, did we get it right? They're like, yeah, you got it right. It's amazing. One of my favorite stories is that we had some folks waiting for the lobby market, and I saw a seasoned citizen, went over, started chatting with her, and she was distraught because they have a fit and wellness class, and at a place that said that they were taking all their space back for kids for over the summer for camp, and they didn't have anywhere to have their class. So he said, you can have your class here. So now every Tuesday and Thursday we have about 40 seasoned citizens doing their fit and wellness class.
That's great.
But that's really what the building is for. Yeah. It's really meant to be a community resource to support things like that. So
you've been there or will have been there a year in April.
Yes.
What has surprised you about your tenure so far?
I don't know about surprise. What I'm really excited about is the fact that we have such an amazingly dedicated team. We have people who just really show up every day for the mission. I'm really pleasantly surprised about the credibility that we have in the community, because before we moved, there is a high level of distrust in this area. Not surprisingly, this is a community who, for so long didn't have any resources, and then you've got a lot of organizations who are just showing up, and it's kind of like, who are you? What do you want? Like, who are, I don't know. I don't know if we can trust you. But again, because we've done everything community-led, we're seeing the benefits of that. People coming in and knowing that Martha's Table is there for them. They know that we don't have some savior mentality of, we read some book and therefore we know that this is what we're going to do and you should do. No. Everything that we do, literally from our community dinners to new programmatic areas, comes from the community. And I'm also really excited about the fact that, the work is showing results. I mean, we've seen, even since I've been there in April, these jumps in everything, right? So we have our lobby markets. We'd have 40 people a day. Now we're, again, over 100. Our community market, which is our once-a-month market where we retract everything up, much bigger market, used to be 100 folks. Now it's over 250 every month. Our community dinners, same thing. So we're seeing in a fairly short amount of time an incredible uptick. And again, I think that goes back to the credibility and the fact that we treat people with dignity and respect.
This dynamic is really important, right? The being able to engage authentically in a community.
Yes.
Robert Coles, who has spent a lot of time writing about service as a faculty member at Harvard, has often talked about the dynamic between the served and those doing the serving. How do you work to manage that relationship?
Yeah, so I think that we actually wouldn't think of our community and our neighbors of those being served. And I don't know that we would even consider ourselves as those serving.
Yeah.
I think it's more that we're all in this together, and our partners are our community members and our neighbors, and they know exactly what they want, exactly what they need, and exactly how to get there. And we happen to be in a place where we can bring what they say they want, which is we would like resources, we would like advocacy, but we don't see that as, us doing something to you and you're receiving something, because I believe we receive so much more than them, right?
Is service the wrong word? Should we be looking for, what kind of paradigm should we be thinking about here?
Again, I just think that it's a relationship,
and
we bring certain things to a relationship, and they bring certain things to the relationship. And if it's imbalanced in any way, it's that we at Martha's Table are getting more
Right.
than our community partners,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is interesting. There's a way in which the notion of service is a tired notion, right? And this is really what it seems to me that you're trying to do, is to really create an authentic sense of community
Yes,
based on relationships.
exactly.
Yeah. Sidwell tries to base itself on relationships. We try to ground ourselves in relationships. Who were your most important relationships at Sidwell Friends?
Well, certainly my friends. I mean, I still have lifelong friends from Sidwell.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So many people talk about, their lifelong friends from college, and I have lifelong friends from college, but the majority of my lifelong friends are actually from Sidwell. Again, I was here since 7th grade, and it's amazing. Every now and then we look up and we're like, wow, we've known each other that many years. But I also had good relationships with some of the faculty, some of the team members. Erica Berry stands out. Diane Scattergood stands out. I just remember interactions with them. I remember Quinetta Norman, may she rest in peace.
Amazing. Yeah.
We used to have really funny and memorable interactions, but I certainly remember her. I think it is really humbling. I think it was about 2 years ago. I was here for the Let Your Life Speak series.
Yeah.
And excuse me, and seeing, Ms. Berry and Ms. Scattergood, it was just like amazing. It just kind of brings back this positive feeling.
You mentioned that you stay in touch with alumni. You want to call them out here? Any call out to your pals?
Of course, man. So many to note, but some of my folks like Nicole Washington, Chris Simmons, and I just have to give the entire Simmons family a shout out. Dr. and Mrs. Simmons, Leslie, Mike, Robbie, love the Simmons.
Being a leader is not always an easy thing to do.
No,
right?
It is not.
And you are out there every day letting your life speak to the values that you hold very dear. All leaders face challenges around particularly ethics, right? And we see our leaders challenged in this way. Can you share with us an especially difficult decision that you had to make around ethics, or an especially difficult situation you had to manage about ethics? And maybe you could tell us also where you take your inspiration from.
Sure. I tell everybody I only have 2 rules. 1, we will always be legal and ethical first. And 2, don't harm anyone I'm responsible for. And it amazes me how people manage to break those rules. It's only 2.
Yeah.
Only 2. When I was at an organization, going through the books, it became very clear that there were monies that were going to people who were friends of people who were affiliated with this organization. I'm not going to use where I was.
But a conflict of interest kind of
I mean, and I've
situation,
found people literally on the back end of monies that are going out, and this is taxpayer dollars. And, once I found that out or discovered that, I cut all of those contracts out. I just cut them off. Just done, not paying a dime. We're not doing this. Now, these people were and are powerful and have a lot of political juice, and were not impressed by that, and said to me, we're going to make some calls, you're going to lose your job, so on and so forth. Fine. I didn't care. I have to sleep at night, and I always knew that, if I lost my job, I believed that I'd be able to find another one, but I was not going to participate in this foolishness. I mean, once then the burden is on you to actually do something, right? Long story short, they did try to get me fired, but it didn't take. Years later, you mentioned earlier that I ran for Congress. Years later, at a debate, I was cornered by one of these people who said, I will never support you because you cut off our money. And I said, I did it then and I'll do it again. That it just is what it is. And sometimes you will lose friends, you will get enemies. But it's more important for me, for my reputation, and again, for me as a person, for folks to know Kim doesn't play with that. We don't do that. In ethical decisions and when you have to make these tough calls, not only do you lose friends, but you can gain enemies. And sometimes that's just okay. And then move on.
You're an inspiring person.
Thank you.
From where do you take your inspiration?
You know, I honestly believe I get it from a couple of different sources. First and foremost, my mother. My mother was the most amazing person I've ever met in life. She passed away 20 years ago now, and people who knew her to this day still speak of her in just beyond glowing terms. I always say that if I could become half the person she was, I would be doing a good job. Like, people just talk about how, like, she touched their lives in just these amazing ways, and she was very powerful and had all these big, great positions, but just, you know, had no ego. Mm-hmm. And so I remember that. And I mentioned earlier about this, me learning names, and I think I got it from her. I mean, we would walk through the halls of Congress, and she would know everyone from the security guard to the maintenance official to Senator so-and-so, you know, and she treated them all the same. And my other inspirations really come from people. I mean, I draw my energy from people. And I've just met the most amazing people in the world. Like, the students that I had when I was at the community college, it's the most resilient folks you've ever seen in life. People would say, oh, those students have so many barriers, and, you know, they didn't finish high school, or, you know, they need to pull themselves up by the bootstraps and da-da-da. And I would say, like, and they always talked about it as a second chance system. I'm like, when did these folks get a first chance? Mm. You know, you're talking about them as if they've done something wrong. You got to put some skin in the game. They got to do. And I'm like, here's the thing. They are awesome. I got a quality education. I was exposed to diversity of ideas and people. You know, I mean, it just, I was given all of the tools and support to be successful. And then you have these amazing people who, again, have never been given a first chance. They didn't have a quality education. They didn't have a support system. And yet they are still fighting. You know, they get knocked down and they get back up. I just source from that. You hear people's stories about housing instability, domestic violence, substance abuse, and they get back up. And they're still trying to pursue their dream. Like, that is amazing. How do we not invest in that?
Yeah. We find ourselves in a moment where people are less willing to invest in those opportunities, which I think is one of the trends that makes Martha's Table even more important today than maybe it's ever been in the district, right, in terms of how the district has changed over the last 10 or 15 years. What sort of inspiration, if any, did you take from Sidwell Friends?
Well, yes, I mean, I think a lot of I think all these things are kind of conflated, right? And Sidwell, what I always talk about was the same concept that everyone was the same. Mm-hmm. Like, the fact that we didn't have valedictorian, salutatorian, like this equality across the board. Anyone can get up and speak in meaningful worship. Even with our student body government, it was still very flat in the sense that everyone's voice mattered and and everyone's voice carried the same weight. You know, Sidwell, at least when I was there, was a school that was very tolerant for the time. I remember there were other schools where people did have issues at the schools with bullying and so on because, you know, maybe they didn't fit a certain mold. But at Sidwell, we were accepting, you know, come one, come all. And I think that was, at least in my perspective with some of the other schools, kind of we were at the forefront of that. And seeing that you can have this melting pot of people from all these different backgrounds and races and ethnicities and religious and sexual orientations and socioeconomic status. I mean, like, and we all came together and we all were fine. I mean, I don't remember like it being a negative bullying place where if you were of this, then people would kind of attack you.
Yeah.
And I think that those principles have really stuck with me. And, you know, again, the equality and the importance of the diversity. I just think that those things have always stuck with me.
We have had this long connection, Sidwell Friends and Martha's Table. What would it look like to deepen that connection?
Well, we love everything that Sidwell has done. You know, the third graders saved our Lyft partnership. Thank you very, very much for that.
Tell us a little bit about that since we're here. So it's a great story.
Yeah, no, it's great because, you know, one of the things that we do is we understand our community and, well, transportation is a big issue in the area where we are. It's limited, it's expensive. So we were looking for partners to help make sure that people could participate in the lobby market. It's great to have something. We're trying to have access, but if you can't get to us, that's obviously an issue. So we embarked on a partnership with Lyft where you could get a ride for $2.50 to our market or to Giant or Safeway in Ward 7 and 8. And it was a 6-month pilot, and it was scheduled to end. And the wonderful third graders from Sidwell wrote Lyft like all these letters that said, "This is a great partnership. Don't end the partnership."
How could you do this? Why would you end this?
It was great. And it went viral, and it basically publicly embarrassed them. And so they extended the partnership.
Yeah.
So that was great.
Well, it's a great example of how you can make a difference.
Absolutely.
Right? Each day, any one of us has the opportunity to have an impact on someone else.
Absolutely.
Right.
And sometimes in the smallest of ways, opening a door and smiling at someone can mean the world to them. And it's really, really important to understand that. So I think in terms of deepening our partnership, please keep the sandwiches coming.
And the soup, right?
Yes.
The vegetables.
Yes.
The long-standing
Yes.
activity for us.
Exactly, because, McKenna's always has a hot meal.
Yeah.
And so the prep on vegetables goes into whatever the hot meal of the day is. Sidwell, supports giving back, so we would love to see more Sidwell volunteers, which would be great.
You mentioned all these volunteer opportunities. Can you maybe explain for local alumni what ways that they might be able to get involved? Like, maybe a few options that would be possible for them.
Absolutely. So we talked about McKenna's Wagon, the prep sessions, and also going out on the wagon.
Which is an amazing experience.
It's the greatest experience. We are looking for drivers in particular, so I'll put that plug in. Our lobby markets are open one is open from 11 to 4, one is open from 11 to 3, and that's something where you assist neighbors who come in and they shop. And everything, again, we do is with dignity and respect. So everything is a very highly simulated experience. So you get a basket and you shop, and the person bags you up. And so we have lobby markets. I mentioned the joyful markets. Those are about 3 hours. Obviously after school, it's right when the kids get out.
Okay.
And
these are at the elementary schools.
These are at all elementary schools in Ward 7 and 8. And again, Tuesday through Friday, there's 4 going on a day. So there's always an opportunity there. We have events all the time. And so if someone's looking for, an evening event, like our community dinner or our community market, those are once a month. So that's an opportunity. And the other thing is, I mentioned our Outfitters Boutique. You can volunteer at it. It's our boutique where you shop, again, at no cost for children's clothes and adult workforce attire. And again, back to the highly simulated experience, you actually get a credit card, and we load credit on the credit card.
Yeah.
And so you go up and you swipe out, and a retail associate checks you out. But there's also an opportunity to donate clothes. We are always looking for clothes, really all ages. Because the adult workforce attire goes really quickly.
Okay.
And again, obviously folks needing clothes for employment is very important. But again, also to clothe the children. And so that's something that we're seeing an incredible uptick in people coming into Outfitters.
Okay,
and
good.
we rely on donations. So if we don't have your size, we don't have anything.
So there's a real need there.
Yes.
Yeah. What are the biggest needs you see, especially where Martha's Table is located in Ward 7 and 8?
I would say the biggest need is people to be in a career with a family-sustaining wage. And when we go back to what the goal is that the folks who are there now can stay and thrive. They're going to have to keep pace with the economics that are moving. Ideally, you want them to move faster than the economics moving, because it's great that we're making millions of dollars of investments in 6 weeks to age 4, but those young people are not making financial decisions for their households for 18 years and probably longer. So if we invest all of this in these young people only to have them thrive in PG County, that's not really what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
So this has to come when we talk about the 2-gen model, and not just families who are connected to Martha's Table, but that whole community that we talk about. The income, it's not at a place where people will be able to stay. And so you have to be able to find ways to move that income. And so that is actually the biggest need. To me, economics sits at the middle of everything, and then everything else kind of sprouts out from that, right? Because your economics dictate health, dictates environment, dictates affiliations with the justice system. It dictates all of these other things, right? So that is the biggest need. You have to get people at the family sustaining wage where they can take care of themselves and their families. And again, we could go down all the social determinants of health, which we are trying to pull on, again, to ensure that people can stay and thrive. But I would really say the economics is sitting in the middle, so we've got to work on getting folks, again, to that family sustaining wage, and then housing. I would say housing is the number 2 issue.
This is so much fun. I want to ask you one last question.
Yep.
What advice would you give your 18-year-old self at Sidwell Friends? If you look back to yourself as a senior, right? Many of our seniors are getting ready to move on now. They're looking to graduation. It's only January, but trust me, they're looking to graduation,
I know.
right? What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah, the advice I'd give myself is to really follow your heart and your passion. I think that somehow that gets derailed. I see so many young people who are like, their heart and their passion is writing, but their plan is to go to law school and then, do the thing that they love. And that just breaks my heart, Like, why? Why do you do that? Because I have to make money. Well, why? You can make money in writing. I hear this all the time. I want to be in social justice work. I want to be in reform. I want to do, but first, I got to go get an MBA and work on Wall Street for a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just really dangerous because I've seen those people over the years very unhappy. You go to law school or MBA or whatever, you rack up a ton of debt, then you really do have to go work somewhere and make a ton of money because you have to pay off the debt. And at the end of the day, the opportunity cost of happiness still isn't there. And I've met so many people, 50s, 60s, they retire, they're like, now I can do the thing I love. And wouldn't it just be better if you spent your life doing the thing that you love? Life is just too short. Things just start to add up. Life happens. You get in a union. Kids come. I mean, and then, like I said, you just look up and you're like, man, my whole life went past me and I didn't get to do what I wanted to do. And so my advice, again, is just be fearless in following your heart and your passion, and everything else will come. I've never wanted to be a dean or be at the White House or be an SES in the government, be a president and CEO. Like, all that stuff happens to come when you're just following your heart and your passion. Everything has a way of working itself out. And at the end of the day, one of my favorite books is called The Happiness Advantage. It's by Sean Aker. And it says that we have everything backwards. People think that you're supposed to work hard, and if you work hard, you get success. And if you get success, then you're happy. And his argument is actually you have to be happy first, and success revolves around happiness. And so that's my advice.
Thank you for letting your life speak, Kim.
Oh, thank you, Bryan. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for your wisdom. This was great fun.
Awesome. Thank you.